You got it. I'm here.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm happy to be joined by Joseph Gitler, the founder and voluntary chairman of Leket Israel organization. We're doing this super early, 8 o'clock for me Central Time, 9 a.m. Eastern, when we usually do 5 because Joseph is located. Where are you, man?
I'm speaking to you right now from Ra'anana, Israel, which is about 20 minutes northeast of Tel Aviv.
So we're kind of on the mark. I usually do it around 4 or 5 p.m. Eastern. So it's 4 o'clock for you. It's 4 o'clock somewhere, right?
It's always 4 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, as I just mentioned to you, I'm really excited because I've been doing this for 11 weeks. You are my 50th episode, and for me, it's exactly hooray. It's important that someone in Israel is joining me for the 50th episode because the idea of 50 is Yovel, or the Jubilee, which is reset. Things. After 50 years, that's considered forever in Judaism. So reset. Maybe that means I should stop doing this or continue and with a new invigoration. But either way, thank you for joining me. And why don't you tell everyone? Let's start off with what Leket Israel is.
Sure. Well, first of all, Warren, thank you so much for having me on and for all your support for our work and for giving us this opportunity. By the way, there's another saying in Hebrew that I know you know. I'll translate it. Acharon, acharon, chaviv. The last is the sweetest. So if I'm the last one, then we'll try to make sure this is the sweetest of all.
All right, perfect. That's good.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on, and for all the viewers. Thank you for watching. Leket Israel is a really simple concept. The Western world, whether we're talking about the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and Israel in this case, we produce enough food to feed everyone, to feed them twice, to feed them 3 times over. And yet in all of our fortunate and successful societies, we have so many people who just can't make ends meet. The amount of money they earn, or in some cases don't earn because they just can't work, simply isn't enough for them to take care of their families. And so what we at Leket do, and many organizations like us around the world, we find ways to efficiently rescue excess food. In our case, from 2 main areas: catering, hotels, corporate cafeterias, army bases, and events. That's the one side. And the second side is we work very closely with the agricultural community, making sure that when market prices are low, or orders are canceled, or the famous ugly fruits and vegetables that no one wants to buy, that we can get our hands on those items and then distribute them to agencies throughout Israel. Today, about 200 agencies, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, Meals on Wheels programs, after school clubs for kids. And it goes without saying, Jews and non-Jews alike in the Holy Land. All citizens of Israel, and even refugees who are not citizens, everyone is eligible to get support from Leket.
So, I mean, that's an amazing mission, organization, undertaking. I mean, what brings you or brings someone to, have an idea like that, and then, to have the ability to execute something like that of that scale?
So I did not know I had the ability, and frankly, as we said in the pre-call, I'm very lucky to have an outstanding team, which really makes it happen. If it was just me, it would just be the 2 of us talking without much to talk about. But really what happened for me was I came to Israel in 2000. I was a lawyer. I worked in high tech. And in 2003, it was a very hard time in Israel, Intifada. And yet, in my La La Land that I lived in, I saw when I would go to events and weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs and hotels, I would just see the waste. And I saw that everyone talked about it. If you ask anyone who's visited Israel and stayed in a hotel, so tell me about the breakfast, they'll say it was amazing. And then if you push them a little bit, they'll say, oh, there was so much food. And then if you push them a little bit, they'll say, what do they do with all that food at the end of the breakfast? Everyone's thought it, everyone said it. The difference was no one did anything about it. And I was just sort of in between things in 2003 at the business. And I said, this is really bothering me. Let me look into it. And as I started to look into it, what I saw in Israel was every caterer that I spoke to, none of them, if you were a caterer in America and someone said to you, donate your excess food to the needy, the first thing your lawyer would say is, what kind of tax deduction can I get? And the second thing they would say in America is, what's my risk of legal liability if the food goes bad? I'm a former lawyer. I can say it. I can make fun of lawyers, but really, that's what happens in so many jurisdictions around the world. And it's so unfortunate. In Israel, every caterer I called said, oh my God, there are a lot of hungry people, a lot of people who can't keep up. Where were you yesterday? They wanted me to come. And that was it. Once you have that kind of energy behind you and push behind you, I was expecting to have to, no one said to me, tell me about your insurance. Okay. Now, sometimes this Israeli attitude is good. Sometimes this Israeli attitude is not good. But in this case, it was incredibly helpful for me. It gave me that push. And that was it. I started to go out in my car and pick up excess food. And one thing led to another, to the point where today Leket's an organization that has over 100 staff members in Israel, a budget of over $20 million this year. We will redistribute this year. This year's a bit strange because of COVID, probably next year also. But we were on pace to distribute somewhere between 3 and 4 million cooked meals and somewhere about 15,000 tons. That's over 30 million pounds of fruits and vegetables to about 200,000 people a week.
I mean, just quantifying it like that, it's so impressive and amazing, and you know, and the growth has been tremendous. What was it like for you in the early days when you were driving around in your own car, you know, as a Leket entrepreneur, you know, as a founder of this amazing organization? You know, how did that feel, being that hands-on with, you know, bringing the food and giving it to those who need it?
Well, I miss those days because pretty much all I worry about now is money, which is what happens to founders of any charity and almost any business. All I worry about is, are we able to pay our bills? So I miss those days where I was much more involved in our logistics. I miss those days. You know, I'll tell you, for example, like people say, how did you start working with the Army? Okay. So now we work from the top down. We work at the highest echelons of the Army. We are their only partner that's allowed to enter and take food. It's very formalized relationship. When I started, I got in my car. I drove to an Army base in Petah Tikva, and I apologize. My wife came in here. Lil, wallet's here. She needs the wallet.
No
if anyone who knows me is watching this, do not get me in trouble, okay? So I remember I got in my car. I drove from Ra'anana to Petah Tikva, which is about 20 minutes from here. I went to Kfar Sirkin. Kfar Sirkin is a famous Army base. That's where the Patriot missiles. I don't know if I'm letting a secret out, but that's where they have Patriot missiles. And if I know it, everyone knows it.
Those are less effective than the Iron Dome anyway, and Kela David. Those are less effective. Whatever.
they're older. They helped us when we needed them.
Exactly.
And then I just went up to the booth of the guard, and I knocked on the door. And I said, hi, this is what I do. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. Like, what does this guy, first of all, my accent, right? Very proud of my Hebrew, but very proud of my American accented Hebrew. But it also calms people down because they figure this guy probably didn't come all the way from America and move to Israel only to trick us out of our extra food, which he's then going to sell. No one was cynical like that. And I said, this is what I do. He said to me, listen, he said, I'll call the chef of the kitchen and I'll see what he says. By the next day, we were already picking up food from the Army. So in the beginning, it was very, you know, bottom up, knocking on doors. But, you know, you built a business. That's in the beginning, you do whatever you have. I'll give you another example. It's a good business lesson. About 2 years in, we were only doing cooked food. I get a call from a farmer. He says, we have persimmons. You know, persimmon, they call it Sharon fruit in some places. I have these persimmons. There was a hailstorm. They're on the ground. Once they hit the ground, according to the Persimmon Farmers Association, we don't sell them. We go to our insurance company. We get insurance. He says to me, we'd like Leket to come and pick them up. I hear you're very good at recruiting volunteers. We had never picked up a fruit. I didn't even know what this fruit was. But you know what I said to myself? It's a week before Hanukkah. Like any startup, you say yes, and then you figure it out. And that was it. And today, as I said, this year, we're going to distribute tens of millions of pounds of fruits and vegetables because we went ahead with that initial call.
Yeah, that's an amazing story also. And I was lucky enough to participate. That's where I got this shirt. And for all those who've watched the 50 episodes know that I only wear Herald or Emerald gear. But today, in your honor and in honor of the amazing organization that you run, I decided to change my shirt maybe because it was
I
laundry.
should have worn a Leket shirt.
Yeah. So repping Leket, and I was fortunate enough to to participate in over Passover a couple years ago. One of those field pickings activities where they might be misfits. There's an organization or a company in the U.S. called Misfits that sells those ugly looking, weird looking, not perfect fruits and vegetables, but we're able to participate in that. So obviously it's come a long way and gotten super organized since those days. So it's
It certainly has. Well, I can tell you, by the way, a lot of that. What's really amazing about the agricultural industry is, despite all the work that Misfits and many Hungry Heart, many others are doing in the U.S., and here also, there's much more of an awareness now to. I put it to you like this: supermarkets in the U.S. that have now started selling ugly fruits and vegetables at a discount, people aren't stupid. They buy them in a second because we all know it's the exact same thing. It just looks funny. Okay. So people really, but if it's the same price, and that's always been the issue, if the ugly looking apple is mixed with the regular apples and it's the same price, no one's ever going to buy it. I've seen people literally, they'll go to the bottom of the barrel just to get to that perfect looking apple. But once you give people a good price on it, they'll buy it. And here in Israel as well, there's much more of an awareness, but despite the awareness and despite the stuff being sold, there's still so much waste that Leket has years and years of work in front of us, even with all these new interesting business initiatives.
So let's talk for a minute about, a lot of people would think that your organization doesn't need to exist in Israel because, as a tourist, you go to Jerusalem, you go to the beach in Tel Aviv, which I always say is like Miami meets a high class world class city. You go up north and you're on the Kinneret, and and it's beautiful and you're staying at a luxury hotel. We don't, as a tourist, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish to Israel, you don't really see poverty and the people in between in the other cities who have these issues as far as not having food equity or the ability to get every meal. So can we talk about that a little bit, and focus on those individuals? Where are they? Why is there such a need?
Yeah, so I think first of all, this is a worldwide phenomenon. If you live in many parts of the rich world, you don't necessarily see the people who need help. And I think Israel's different, let's say, than the U.S. In the U.S. they talk a lot about rural poverty. That doesn't really exist in Israel. In Israel, the moshavim and the kibbutzim, which are these certain communities, smaller rural communities, there historically and today people live pretty well there. There's not much poverty. Most of the poverty in Israel, in a way like the U.S., is the urban poverty. You're right, and you don't see it because Israel doesn't have high crime. Okay, so you don't hear about stay away from this area. It's a high crime area. I'm in Ra'anana, right? Most people who know Ra'anana, it's a very upper middle class city, but it's an old city. It's almost 100 years old. And we have a lot of people here who live in Ra'anana who perhaps their apartment might be worth a lot of money now because of all the influx of people from overseas. It's raised the prices, but they have almost no income. So they have this asset with no income and they happen to be living in the right place. So just even in Ra'anana itself, there are hundreds of families who need support because they just have very little income. Of course, in Israel, you also have historically poor communities. We have ultra-Orthodox communities. We have certain, in the Bedouin community, which is very poor, Arab communities, which are poor. We have all the Ethiopians that have come over the years, which we've tried. Israel's tried so hard to pick them up, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully. There's no country in the world that's taken in the amount of immigrants per capita, let's say over the last quarter century, 50 years, and made a pretty good go of it. It's not perfect. So the pockets of poverty that you see are a lot in the development towns in the south. There's a lot of poverty down there. And then the typical urban poverty in Jerusalem, in South Tel Aviv, right? Tel Aviv is a perfect example. I give you a perfect, we took one of our major donors for a tour of South Tel Aviv last summer. Okay? He lives in Tel Aviv. We took him to a street which is rife with drugs and prostitution and homeless people, a really tough street in South Tel Aviv. He says, Joseph, you're not going to believe this. He points, he says, that's my office. He sees from the street right, he says, there's my office. And that's, but he never knew about it. He never saw it. He never noticed it. He's on Rothschild. He's facing the ocean. He's not facing south. And that's what it is with poverty all the time. And part of our job at Leket is to find not just the people who are known to be poor, but also to try to find the people who are proud and don't want to take help. And that, by the way, that is going to be one of the defining issues of social services right now, everywhere. We have loads of people who've never in their lives needed help, but maybe they didn't have enough savings. And it's scary to see how 2-3 months of someone being out of work, even with government help, like this, out, evicted. And so we are going to have to get the message out very clearly. We already had many instances. I even heard yesterday from one of my coworkers. She was down in one of our partner organizations called La Sova, which is in South Tel Aviv, that primarily caters to African refugees. It's a very, very large soup kitchen. They were down there doing some filming, and in English speaking, we don't get a lot of English speakers coming into soup kitchens in Israel. English speaking young woman in her 30s comes up and says, are you guys from Leket? And she says, I used to volunteer with Leket. I used to do this with Leket. I used to do that. She says, now I've been out of a job for 3 months. And she started to cry. And for someone who moved from America to Israel to end up in a soup kitchen is actually probably the saddest thing I think I've heard in my 17 years of doing this. So it's a very, very difficult situation right now where your listeners are everywhere in the world. But I know the people watching this are very concerned about what's happening here in the Holy Land.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's terrible to hear, but it's the truth of our reality these days. And with so many, with unemployment numbers, in the US, and then I'm sure in Israel, and, businesses hurting and people hurting, it trickles down. And, those without savings and, who didn't have need before definitely had that need. I have to ask, I mean, the virus is also affecting, I was supposed to be in Israel for Passover. And, my in-laws and our family weren't the only ones going to be in that hotel, and that we weren't going to be the only hotel full. There's, a multitude of hotels full with those amazing breakfasts. Even if it's kosher for Passover, it's still pretty darn good. The bread on the day after is way better though. And then every other, week in, week out, you have, tremendous activity at hotels. You have a tremendous amount of catering events. You have, the army, which is much more active during that time. And now everything, including Israel, the world, but Israel also comes to grinds to a halt. And, you don't have all this food surplus. What does that do to an organization like yours that's, recovering food waste?
Right. So the slowdown, the closure of tourism, the slowdown of hotels, the slowdown in restaurants, the slowdown in events since the middle of March has been incredibly painful for Leket and the people that we serve, because in ordinary times, Leket rescues around 10,000 excess meals a day from all those types of sites. That was, let's say, March 1st, 10,000. March 15th, we were down to 1,000 meals. Wow. Over the last few weeks, things have picked up a little bit. We were getting about 3,000 to 4,000 meals. But for those following the news, Israel looks like it might go into some sort of partial closure very soon. And that probably would mean lessening of meals again. What we did during the months of March, April, and May is we launched a massive campaign to purchase food actually from companies and hotels and caterers that normally give us the food for free, to help them help their workers. They help us all the time. We wanted to help them. And we purchased over the span of 3 months, anywhere between 10 and 12,000 meals every single day. As you can imagine, that's an incredibly expensive hobby. And that money, we raised millions and millions of dollars, but we spent all those millions of dollars doing what we were supposed to do. I don't know, we're pushing the government hard now because we're also concerned, like charities are all over the world, about what philanthropy is going to look like over the next 6, 12, 18, 24, 36 months. We're really clueless right now. And so it's a scary time when you're actually a charity that we actually need to expand now. Okay. We have incredible opportunities in agriculture that's replaced, because understand, all the hotels and the caterers, et cetera, closing down, all the stuff the farmers were going to sell them, we're getting our hands on now. So we actually need huge additional resources for agriculture. And the scary thing is now, like all charities, we're actually looking at how can we save money, when actually what we need to be doing is the opposite. How can we spend more money?
Yeah, I mean, you have a contraction with tourism and the meal donations that you're getting, because there's not as much food waste, because there's not as much catering and food. Then you have a contraction in other people, even donors, trying to, I mean, that donor base, they're real people also. They're hurting. They, got a bunch of money got shaved off in the market, or this happened or that happened. But you have this massive need for expansion, and you also have the responsibility of putting food. I mean, without you guys, these people are not eating. So did your meal cost go up significantly? And how are you going to bridge that gap, now and then moving forward?
So we are in for so the first thing we've done is we've reallocated resources towards getting more agriculture. And the reason is, at the end of the day, Leket is a food rescue organization. We're not a food purchasing organization. It costs us 10 times as much to purchase a meal and deliver it as it does to rescue a meal and deliver it. Now, the question that's begged is, okay, now there are no meals to be rescued. So what do? Do you shut down? So we didn't shut down. We used our logistics. We continue to use our logistics. We're reallocating resources towards agriculture. Food purchase is probably, in a mass scale, probably not a long-term option, only because to replace with purchasing what we get normally would cost us probably about, $1 million a month.
Wow.
Just to purchase food. And for that we're gonna, it's gonna have to be the government. There's only one entity that can really take care of that, and that's the government. And we'll see. We're working a lot with the government. We're talking. We're pressuring, and we're not in this alone. There are many feeding charities in Israel, all working in concert to try to take care of the people. We're just a little bit unique because we're so focused on rescuing food, and not. But that's, as you can see, that's a weakness in our business model.
Yeah, but that makes it, all the more important for, for people to pay attention to you guys and to, make donations now, because again, your mission doesn't stop. Again, it increases, in this situation. So I call upon everyone, and I know that I've been, trying to, help you guys, and I call on other folks, like, to join me in doing that, because, again, you need to fill that gap. And, I not to put down other charitable organizations, but a museum doesn't need a big budget right now because no one's visiting that. There's plenty of nonprofits, whether it's, globally or in Israel, that, that a lot of fundraising dollars go to, or some other organizations that are very top heavy with, big overhead. I know a lot of that stuff is public information, but, here you are trying to run a lean organization, and you're pivoting to put all the money on the streets, and all the, meaning the food in the streets, and give it to folks to really help. I mean, you're changing lives or saving lives. I mean, to me, it stands out as a much more important issue than some other charities right now.
Well, we're cutting from our budget all the things that donors like to see cut from the budgets, not because we don't think that they're important, but just because we want to make sure, if we have a cash crisis, that the most important thing is to keep our operations running. Everything else really simply does not matter. Outside of that, I think that basic needs, and I'm not judging any other charity and what they do, but right now, with where the world is, basic needs are key, and unfortunately, ever expanding, and looks like they're going to be expanding for a while, unless some miracle comes. We need a miracle now, actually. We really do.
Yeah. I mean, all the little, the CNBC alerts of, remdesivir doing okay, and other, the trials going all right. It pops the market for a couple of days, but it doesn't give that sustained feeling of confidence, and it certainly doesn't in Israel. That's tough to deal with.
By the way, the Israeli papers every day have some, because we think we're so smart in Israel. Every day, this breakthrough, that breakthrough. I've heard of 100 breakthroughs in the last 3 months, but I haven't seen any of them actually commercial. So what we really need is people to behave, people to live. Well, one of the problems, I can't even say people to listen to their authorities in America, because some of the authorities tell people don't wear masks. So,
this is how I roll. This is how I roll.
Yeah, I posted a video on Facebook yesterday where I was talking in our warehouse, and then but the people behind me who were working were wearing masks. And then I put them out and said, the only reason I'm not wearing a mask now is because I can't wear a mask and do an interview.
It's definitely harder. That's why I try to do it away from everybody. So you said you've been bashing on the door of the government along with other, food organizations. What's their response been? Because you guys all, as a combined effort, fill a huge void in social services. And again, like bottom line, feeding people, the most important thing to keep people alive and safe and healthy during this time, to eat nutritious and good meals. Like, what's their response been, and what do you see happening over the next 6-12 months?
So we do get some government support regularly. The government of the state of Israel in general feels that its other welfare projects put enough money in people's pockets to enable them to purchase food. So it's always been a bit of a back burner. We don't have a Department of Agriculture here like in America that spends hundreds of billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, buying excess produce, excess dairy, etc. It's a debate, between different segments of the government. Israel also has been giving pay. Today they announced payments for families. So the government will say, we don't need to give something like Leket money to get food. We just gave money directly to the families. But I think what we all understand is it's never enough. Okay. And today, for example, the government announced a payment to everyone. So I'm very fortunate. I don't need the 2,500 shekels from the government. I shouldn't be getting that money from the government. But of course, it's much more complicated to try to figure out who should get it and who shouldn't. So of course, we call on people, if you don't need it, donate it to Leket or some other worthy
I didn't get my 1,200 in the U.S. I didn't get my 12.
How come? Are you self-employed? Maybe I'm sure there's a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to file your taxes, buddy.
I paid it. I paid it yesterday, man.
There you go. So I think there will be more money forthcoming from the government. There's a lot of pressure, but the government of Israel has just proven time and time again that big money for this issue they've left to the private sector. So whether you like it or not, and there are a lot of good social service areas. So for example, mental health or foster care, which the government here does a great job of, pours money into. Unfortunately, from the side of the government, I seem to have gotten into an issue where the government has not been overly supportive financially.
So where does the majority of your funds come from? As far like, is it Israel-based donors? Is it U.S.-based donors?
So I would say it's a mix. Maybe 10% from the government in 2020. Hopefully that will grow. The rest is all philanthropy, from people who give $5 to people who give many hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm very proud of the fact that right now we're on pace to raise nearly 40% of our budget this year in Israel. Wow. There's plenty of money in Israel, and this is a worldwide crisis, so Israelis need to give also. And then the biggest part of the budget comes from the US, and then all the other countries, Canada, UK, Switzerland, Australia. Those are the other, France, I shouldn't forget the French. Don't worry, they're not watching. They don't understand either of us, so they ain't watching us. But we really have wonderful partners. They all moved to Israel, yeah. Most of the money, again, also comes from the Jewish community, but I must also thank our many evangelical partners, primarily in the US, but also in Singapore. We have a wonderful partner there. And in Canada, Canadian evangelical. So it's really, we have wonderful support, but we want to expand. And that's really my message to everyone who's watching. In this day and age, we should not be talking about retrenchment. We should be talking about advancement and growing charities that take care of those most vulnerable.
I agree completely. Before we wrap up, tell everyone, like, if it was a regular week or a regular Jewish holiday of Sukkot coming up, the holiday of booths, what kind of opportunities and things do you have in person? Because again, I know you picked things up yourself from those fields with the persimmons, but like I said, I participated in, in an activity with the family. So like, what kind of stuff do you have that you can do hands-on in Israel to help, once things reopen? And right now, obviously the call is to donate, but, tell us a little bit about that.
So our volunteerism is actually ongoing right now, but in very small groups. Like we normally have 1,000 volunteers on average a week, either picking in the fields or repackaging in our warehouse. Right now, we're limiting it to 35 volunteers at a time in the fields and 10 volunteers at a time in the warehouse, which is very sad for us because it just means our work moves slower. But when the doors open up and people start coming back, we look forward to droves and droves of people from all over the world coming and helping us volunteer, picking, packing, distributing. We need your help.
All right, so I'm gonna turn around for a second. No, but really, I want you to tell everyone where everyone find Leket? How can you donate? And who can you contact? Both in the U.S. and both in Israel and abroad.
So first of all, Warren, I want to tell you, as much as I appreciate being your final guest, you should keep at this. You're very good at it. You're a natural. So let's not make this your retirement. Our website is the easiest, www.leket.org. There you can find all the information on how to donate in many, many jurisdictions around the world. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me, my email, Joseph, Joseph, @leket.org. And we are appreciative of any support that you can give. And first-time donors to Leket should know that we have a matching program from one of our major supporters who matches all first-time donations to Leket. So take advantage of that and be generous.
That's wonderful. Thank you for joining me, and most importantly, thank you for your amazing mission and what you're doing, and sticking with it and growing through this really trying but time where the need is growing as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you to everyone who's watching, and then we only see better times ahead very quickly.
Amen. Be well, man. Thank you so much.